Hello friends, in the series which we are doing on the making of contemporary India from 1950 to 1990s, today we will talk about the linguistic reorganization of the Indian states. And as we talked about the Constitution of India in our last lecture, and how Constitution of India talked about the way the states they are to be organized, and whatever the important concerns of the makers of the Constitution, as many of them they also participated in the national movement as well. So all of us should keep in mind an important aspect with regard to the linguistic reorganization, that language is an important aspect of culture, and how the issue of language became very important immediately after independence as well, when certain states they wanted to be reorganized on the basis of the language. In the context of the readings or the bibliography which is associated with it, one can refer to Bipin Chandra's India after independence, Ramchandra Guha India after Gandhi, then Rajni Kothari Politics in India, and W.H. Morris Jones The Government and Politics of India, London 1987. So these are some of the readings which one can refer when one is talking about the linguistic reorganization of the Indian states. In the course of our discussion, we will try to situate the issue of language in the broader context of the politics which is associated with the language. We will also try to locate it within the context of the issue of linguistic identity. We will try to see that how language as part of culture is very close to the people, those who were part of such kind of movements with regard to maintaining their linguistic identity, and also language as some sort of a measure which is very important from the framework of the administrative efficiency or administrative expediency. So all these issues they will be examined in the course of the debate which we are going to have. And before coming to the question of linguistic reorganization directly, one has to see that how, when India became independent, the various kinds of challenges which were there in the context of India. Partition, for example, was one, idea of nation building was another, promoting national integration because the divisions were there, then economic, caste and gender inequalities which were there in the society. So one has to see the situation in a holistic manner, that how the issue of the displacement of people, those who went from India to Pakistan or from Pakistan to India, so how these people they were being displaced and they were called refugees in their homeland, and how the issue of their resettlement was an important challenge during those times. The idea of nation building, as because the kind of divisions which are there in the Indian society on the basis of religion, on the basis of caste, on the basis of language, so there can be some kind of multiple divisions. So promoting the national integration was an important concern in those times, and how this national integration could be achieved, and how language could also play an important role in this national integration, that also can also be seen. And at the same time we also see that how the economic, caste and the gender inequalities which are there in the society, and because of these inequalities people they do not feel equal to each other, the way they are being discriminated, and how these kinds of concerns, these kind of challenges they were to be removed from the Indian society. Then another concern, important concern, was to build some kind of a democratic and civil libertarian society, and because many of the people they were illiterate from that point of view. And another important concern was to undertake the economic development within a democratic political structure. So we find that how the issue of democracy and civil liberty they were important, and how they were to be provided to the people, those who were not all that educated at that point of time, and the issue of economic development also had to carry on without any kind of a disturbance, keeping in mind also taking along the issue of democratic political structure as well. And all this was to be done in a situation where India was left very poor when British they left, and many of the resources of India, how they had been exploited by the British or the colonial period. We find that millions and millions of Indian rupees, they were being taken away from India to Britain in terms of not only the costly material which was taken from India, but at the same time the way British they collected revenue and other resources which they generated. So all that money which was there from India, it went to Britain in huge quantities, because of which we find that Indian situation became quite poor, and there was a lot of unemployment as well, because there were no modern industries. So we find that in this kind of a situation where we find that the people they were in a way divided on so many issues of caste, religion, gender, economic and social status. So language was another important concern, and how language can play an important role to integrate or consolidate a nation. So that has also to be seen, and if one can see that what was the situation in the earlier times, then we find that the way the provinces they were being divided in pre-1947, they were being done in a haphazard manner during the British times. So when these kind of provinces they were being divided in a haphazard manner, then they had to be recreated, they had to be reorganized in such a way that they were seen to be more uniform, and at the same time some kind of a unity got reflected in that particular province or a state. And we find that when we were talking about the British times, then the focus of the British was on the exploitation of the Indian resources. Their main concern was not to have any kind of a linguistic or cultural cohesion, and they did not want to pay attention to such kind of issues. And many a times we find that the states or the provinces which were there, they were multilingual and multicultural in nature. And we also find that the princely states they also had a lot of heterogeneity in those princely states as well. So when we try to understand the issue of linguistic states, then we find that the case for the linguistic states as administrative units was very strong, and we have also talked about that how language is closely related to culture and customs of people. So we have to see that from the administrative point of view, to have some kind of a states where a particular kind of a language or one language is being spoken, that language can also be used in the administrative sphere, that language can be used as a state language, and that language can be taught to the entire state as well as some sort of a mother tongue as well. And how the issue of language is also related to the issue of culture. Culture, as we try to understand, is our way of life, and it will encompass not only our food habits, dress, our law, our religion, but we also find that language is also a very important component of culture. And many times we find that it also in a way overshadows the religion and other divisions, where we find that people from different religions are speaking one particular language in one particular state. So in this way language was one factor which could in a way bring people closer to each other. And the situation of India, where we find that how British they left India, how shamelessly they left India, that how both Indians, both Hindus as well as Muslims and other communities, they suffered during that particular period, because British they did not create such kind of a structure that any kind of a violence could have been avoided. And because of this we find that there was a lot of disorder immediately after independence. And we find that when we talk about how the education has to in a way move around, how it has to spread, then the mass literacy when we talk about, and all these things can be seen when you have the medium of the mother tongue, which becomes very important. And the people, those who are in a way participating in democratic exercises, then any kind of a politics or administration which is being conducted, and if that politics or administration is being conducted in their mother tongue, that then it becomes comparatively easier for the people, because they are able to relate to their own indigenous or particular language. And but at the same time, there is an argument that mother tongue can't be the medium of education or administration or judicial activity unless a state is formed on basis of such a predominant language, because if there will be a number of languages in a particular state or an area, then it will be very difficult to make one language as a state language. So unless you have this kind of a division of the provinces or the states on the basis of one language or a predominant language, and most of the people of that particular state, they follow that particular language, then only we can talk about making that language as a medium of education or administration or judicial activity. And one of the important concerns of the people, those who were associated with the linguistic reorganization of these states, they were also thinking along those lines. But the people, those who were at the helm of affairs when India became independent, many times they thought otherwise at the initial level, but later they also relented and followed such kind of a policy. And if you see the politics during the national movement, we see that Congress party, it undertook the political mobilization in mother tongue, and in 1921 it amended its constitution and reorganized its regional branches on a linguistic basis. And many a times Congress repeatedly committed itself to redrawing of provincial boundaries on linguistic lines. So we see that Congress as a major political party during the national movement was committed to reorganize the states or provinces on linguistic basis, because it also reorganized its regional branches on that basis. And Congress also was committed in the context that how the provincial boundaries, they should be redrawn on that basis where language is predominant. And after independence, many of the Congress leaders, they in a way deterred on this question for some time, but finally the issue of language could be settled on this issue where the languages, they were being recognized, or the states, they were being reorganized on the basis of the language. And some of the thinkers, those who were associated with the national movement, and apart from the national movement, they themselves were such great thinkers and writers, and in a way the kind of ideas which they projected about India and nation and internationalism. One of them was Rabindranath Tagore, and the way he talked about the unity of India is to be seen as a unity of spirit. And all of us are very aware about the complex diversity which could be seen in India, and the way large number of linguistic, cultural and geographic economic zones are there in India. So when you talk about India as a one country, and how the people, those who are there as part of India, we find that India is a multilingual country where thousands of languages, dialects, etc., they are being spoken by diverse kind of people. We also find that people from different religions, they reside in India, and the idea of Sarv Dharm Sambhav is one of the mainstay of the Indian life, and this idea is being talked about quite often at different platforms. So despite having this kind of a diversity, the idea of unity in diversity, the idea of unity of spirit given by Rabindranath Tagore, they were also very important, because these were the ideas which were, for example, the unity in diversity talks about that how one has to consolidate people, one has not to talk about the assimilation of people, they should not be assimilated that way. Their diversity is to be conserved and preserved, and at the same time within that diversity one is unified as well. So that was an important idea, because when India you find that it was divided on so many lines of language and religion and caste. So the people, they had to in a way feel unified in some way, and for that unification one has to understand that this diversity, despite having this kind of a diversity, they were unified as one country. And we also find that when people, they were divided on the cultural lines, when people, they were divided on the linguistic lines, many times they felt that their culture, their language is comparatively superior to another. But when one tries to understand the situation in a holistic manner, in a rational manner, then languages can be different to each other, cultures can be different to each other, but cultures cannot be superior and inferior, because all cultures, they have their own unique quality, and all of them, they are very important. So similarly, languages are also very, very important, and we find that 1961 census, it talks about 1549 languages as mother tongues. So that was the period when we see that so many mother tongues, they were being talked about, and we are not talking about the languages or the creoles, where you have the mixing of the languages. And the constitution also recognizes so many languages. So when you talk about how the nation had to be consolidated in some way, how the nation had to be unified, so some kind of a strategy which was to be followed after 1947 was in the framework of the territorial integration, where you find that how the Indian princely states and the various provinces, they were to be in a way integrated. Then the mobilization of political as well as the institutional resources, that the way the resources which are available with us, they had to be mobilized, and the issue of economic development. We have to also see that economic development is an important concern, and unless you will have development, then the standard of living of the people, the elevation of poverty, then providing of employment to so many people or large number of people, they cannot take place. And one has to also see that all these things are also related to the issue of providing education, having good health care. So economic development will also be associated in the framework of providing good facilities to the common masses. And we also find that despite having so many kinds of disparities in India, there was always a thrust that people, they should be considered, they are to be considered equal, and the Constitution of India has provided these kind of rights to the Indians in the framework of right to equality, and how any kind of inequality is to be removed from the society, and how the integration of the people through the idea of unity in diversity has to take place, where they are not to be assimilated, they do not have to follow the ideas which are there in the mainstream. Rather, people, those who are on the marginalized areas, the cultures, the languages, and their eating pattern, their dress pattern, all has to be maintained in a certain way. They do not have to change themselves in any way. So the idea is to integrate them in such a manner that there is no assimilation. This is what the unity in diversity talks about. And we find that the people, those who were associated with the Constitution of India, and how the Constitution of India, the Constituent Assembly, it played an important role in terms of the Constitution of India, and how the focus was also on the issue of the federal structure with a strong center, and how at the same time some kind of an autonomy was also to be given to the states. So that is why we have these state list, we have the central list, and then we have a concurrent list. So on the issue of the state list, the states they have to decide on those issues. So this kind of a federal nature, where the states, they have to take care of their own needs, and at the same time their dependence on the center for the financial aspects or the funds, where the center has to transfer funds to these states. So we find that the people, those who were associated in the making of the Constitution, they were very well aware about the differences between the decentralization and disintegration, and between the ideas of unity and integration and centralization. So they wanted to in a way place the society, place the constitution and those kind of ideas in such a manner that the cohesiveness of the society is maintained. And when you talk about any kind of a diversity in India, then we find that how language is a very important force in all the societies, and it is also very true in the context of a multilingual society like India, where we find that the multilingual society, where so many languages they are being talked about, they are being used by the people in as their native languages and their mother tongues, and at the same time the school going children and in the colleges students are also learning other languages apart from their mother tongues as well. And many a times in many schools European languages they are also being introduced. So how the culture of a particular place can also be learned when you are learning in that particular language. So language definitely is an important component from that point of view. And we also find that when you talk about the linguistic diversity, it would inevitably give birth to a strong political current around the issues which are linked to language, such as the educational and economic development, job and other economic opportunities, and access to political power. So these kinds of ideas, that how linguistic diversity which is there in a particular society, then strong political currents on certain issues which are linked to language, which are and how the issue of language is also very important from the educational point of view, that which language in which language can you appear in certain exams. So the idea of job and other economic opportunities is related to the idea of language. How the educational and economic development, where we find that how certain languages they become the language of mobility, and how in certain sectors certain languages are preferred. So one has to see that in this particular environment where we are talking about the linguistic diversity, and how language is also associated with the various kinds of issues. And we find that Mahatma Gandhi, while he was urging people to discourage all the vociferous tendencies and feel and behave as Indians, and he was trying to communicate this in January 1948 before his death, and he argued that the redistribution of provinces on linguistic basis was necessary if provincial languages were to grow to their full height. So Gandhiji also felt from this kind of a perspective, where he was trying to discourage all sorts of divisive tendencies, and he also argues in the framework of the provinces that how one has to redistribute these kind of provinces on a linguistic basis, and how the languages will also grow, because languages were part of the cultures, and when these cultures will flourish in different states, then the languages will also grow, and the literature which is associated with these languages, it will also grow at the same time. So we find that free India would it base its administrative boundaries on the linguistic principle. These were the kind of things which were being talked about. And when India becomes independent, then we find that because the partition experience was such that how because of the partition such kind of problems they came, and so many people they got dislocated. So the people, those who were at the helm of the national leadership, they could not implement the ideas of the Congress which the Congress believed in before independence, and they in a way we find that the kind of problems which were seen after independence, where you find that a lot of law and order situation was there, and how the Kashmir problem which emerged after the partition, and a war-like situation vis-a-vis Pakistan also emerged. So this kind of economic problems which were there in the society in terms of poverty, inequality, then the political structure was such at that point of time that immediately after independence many of the issues which came up could not be handled in a certain manner because of the lack of resources at that point of time, and at the same time the issue of law and order could also be seen, where we find that so many people, they migrated from one place to another, and the resources were also not available. So all these kinds of problems could be seen, and the people, those who were there at the helm of affairs, the people, those who were the decision makers, they felt that at that point of time the issue of national unity was more important, that how they had to consolidate the national unity. And if any kind of an effort is being made to redraw the internal boundaries at that point of time, then it might dislocate the administration and the economic development, and it may also intensify the regional and linguistic rivalries. It may unleash the destructive forces and damage the unity of country. So the people, those who were part of the national movement, the people, those who now became the part of the part of the government at the center, they felt that they should any effort if is made in terms of redrawing the internal boundaries of the country, then it may dislocate the administration and the economic development, which on which their basic focus was. And any kind of a regional and linguistic rivalry will not be good for the unity of the country, and any destructive forces, they may take advantage of such kind of a situation, and they may damage the unity of the country. So these people, they at that point of time, they did not feel that they should carry on or they should undertake such kind of an exercise, but in 1950s they were able to they had to carry such kind of exercise, when we find that Potti Shri Ramlu, he undertook, who was a freedom fighter and who undertook a fast unto death, and how he was instrumental in the creation of the first linguistic state. So this we will discuss in our next lecture. Till then, thank you very much.